5 Ukrainian officials have been charged with stealing $40 million. Now, the money was supposed to be used to purchase ammunition as Ukraine's war with Russia continues. Now, to talk about this in more detail is our foreign affairs expert, Lisa Daftari from the Foreign Desk, who joins us from Los Angeles. Lisa, that does not instill a lot of confidence in countries such as Canada and the United States, which has been supporting Volodymyr Zelensky in his war with Vladimir Putin.
Oh, and let me tell you, this is just one example of, I am sure, many, many more examples of embezzlement, money going in the wrong hands, even the weapons purchased with the aid that was provided falling into the wrong hands. This is one case when these 5 individuals that are facing up to 12 years in prison took the 40 million that was supposed to buy, I think, 100,000 mortar shells, and instead obviously went to the wrong place. Now, the only reason that we are finding this out is because Ukraine is trying to be more transparent, try to crack down, so to speak, on this kind of fraudulent business, because they want to become part of NATO. So they're trying to say, oh, look at us. We are doing autocorrect and we are looking at our own, and we are finding those who are taking advantage of that aid money that all you wonderful people in the West are giving us. So look, the war continues. It's awful. I know many people are very much proponents of giving Ukraine as much aid as possible to ward off the Russian threat. But how many years into this do we have to go to realize that there is really no solution in sight? There's no off-ramp for Putin. It looks like this is his call, his shots, his decision to make as to when he wants this to end. So we're hoping for some better resolution soon, some sort of compromise soon. And of course, in the meantime, I'm sure we will uncover many more cases like this one.
And no call for peace talks as of yet between Putin and Volodymyr Zelensky?
No, but it looks like Zelensky's turning a corner, only because it seems like the aid has slowed down. Obviously, here in the United States, there is much more pushback with regards to different legislative bodies not wanting that aid to go to Ukraine, or at least, having some sort of conditions, or they're basically combining it with other things. I think we talked about this a couple of weeks ago with Biden wanting to push that aid bill through and then buddying it up with a border compromise. Again, horrific, because both are very important and both are very different and should be dealt with differently. But as you know, this is politics, right? They buddy up things that the left wants, the right wants, Democrats want, Republicans want, and they try to get things passed that way. In the meantime, there is no actual, nothing on the calendar yet, but it looks like Zelensky, I think, has turned some sort of corner to look at, some more, constructive ways of bringing this to an end.
Lisa, we had the Freedom Convoy here in Canada 2 years ago protesting government mandates, and now there appears to be a very large convoy forming in Texas, and these guys are calling themselves God's Army. What are they fighting for?
So as we know, the state of Texas very, very much has taken border security into its own hands, actually fighting with Biden's administration to continue their own way of keeping the border safe. As we know, Texas is facing the major brunt of this influx, record number of migrants coming over the border. They have put up barbed wire. They have taken other ways of blocking waterways and things like that. And of course, Biden has taken them to court, tried to fight what the state of Texas is doing. Now there's a convoy that is traveling in order to bring attention to border security, and they are trying to, quote, get the border back and try to protect the border in ways that they believe that our federal government is not doing and will not do. And it is absolutely too late. And I mean, the numbers last month broke records, and we have really every month in 2023 was a record-breaking month. And as a whole, the year was a record-breaking year in terms of the sheer number of migrants coming over. How I'll also bring your attention to the fact that many of these sanctuary cities are buckling. Many of them are remorseful, and some are not admitting it. But when you look at cities like Chicago and New York and elsewhere, they just cannot absorb the sheer numbers. So it brings us back to the idea that theoretically, of course, bringing in all those who are poor and want opportunity and want to come to this promised land is a wonderful idea theoretically, but when it comes to application, This is not something that the United States can continue to absorb in terms of the sheer numbers. So you find them on the street corners, you see them sleeping on the streets, you see, these are not humane conditions. And that is why we have to slow the pace at which these migrants are coming into the country.
There are reports that Iranians enlisted a Hells Angels biker to put a hit on someone in the United States, and there's a Canadian connection or two.
Yes. So an Iranian national basically enlisted two Canadians from a biker gang to go and assassinate a dissident, a very high profile dissident that was living in the state of Maryland here in the United States. Of course, this plot was foiled and they were actually uncovered. And now we're talking about the story without the release of the name of that dissident, of course, to keep his or her security. But just horrific how much, and this is really the bigger issue here is not this specific case, but more so how comfortable Iran's regime has become at not only locating these individuals within Canada and the United States, to think that they live among us first and foremost, right? So to think that they're in Canada, in the United States, individuals who are working for Iran's regime to carry out these plots. The fact that they have no fear to carry out these plots on Canadian soil, on American soil, the fact that they have infiltrated, whether it's the universities, whether it's the labs in the case of China, whether it's our government, the Biden administration, I know the Canadians as well have this issue where there are pro-regime Iranians that are informing or advising or consulting our governments as to how to deal with their Iran policy. That absolutely has to change, and we hope to see that change coming soon. I know that this is a big wake-up call for Canada, for the United States, when we see stories like this, to know that there are those among us who, again, will carry out these plots on our soil here in the West, and to carry out Iran's dirty work here. So I think we've pushed for sanctions. We've pushed for both the Canadian government and the U.S. government to not allow the children, for example, or the family members of these Iran officials, the regime officials, to live in Canada or the United States, to go to school in Canada or the United States. But we have yet to really do a deep cleaning of these influences here.
Islamic Republic-backed terrorist groups in both Syria and Iraq vacated their military posts, Lisa. Apparently, they fear U.S. retaliation following the death of 3 American soldiers near the northeastern part of Jordan over the weekend.
Yeah, so we absolutely know that this was an Iran-backed proxy or two groups that killed 3 U.S. servicemen, and obviously President Biden has said we will retaliate on our own time in our own way. So Iran's regime is first denying that they had any involvement in this attack, and secondly, evacuating. So if you are real men, if you are really macho about this jihadism, stay and fight. Why are you running away, right? This just goes to show the game, this whack-a-mole game that Iran's regime is playing in provoking the West into a war that we were already fighting, frankly. It's just a matter of really not allowing it to escalate. And I know the Biden administration is absolutely has that goal in mind. But look, too little, too late. Deterrence does not start on the battlefield. Deterrence starts at the podium. It starts with foreign policy. It starts with the stance that the United States has taken for the last 3 years, which was, we want to deal with you. We will make nice with you. We will remove vital and biting sanctions. We will allow you to sell oil to China. We will allow you to sell weapons to Russia. And that is why we are where we are. And so Iran's regime will continue flexing, whether it's through the Houthis, whether it's through Hezbollah, whether it's through Hamas. And again, the Biden administration finding itself in a situation where it can retaliate or respond to these one-off attacks. But how about the bigger picture? When will this end? And when will Iran's regime get the message?
Federal authorities caught a terrorist at the U.S. southern border and released him back into the country, Lisa. Now, this guy apparently roamed freely for about a year before being arrested in Minnesota recently.
Yes, and this is just one example. A few things to point out here. First, the fact that there are so many individuals coming through the southern border from countries that have no relationship with the southern border. So why are we finding nationals from China and Afghanistan and Syria coming through our southern border? obviously taking advantage of the vulnerability of our southern border and the fact that they can get right in. Secondly, the number of individuals that have been identified on the southern border that have that were on the FBI's most wanted list. And then we talk about those who are not on the most wanted list, but should be, right? And soon enough, perhaps will be. But that is exactly the vulnerability that the southern border, or the risk that the southern border now poses, is that these individuals are taking advantage. The fact that there are so many men between 18 and 40 coming through the southern border. These are not just families that want a better life, but also these men. One can argue they're coming into work, and that is, workforce age, but also it is something to look at in terms of national security. But, I hope that we as a nation, and I know that these migrants do trickle up into Canada, and I know that many of these bad actors do find themselves in Canada as well. So it's something to talk about, obviously, with relation to both Canada and the United States. But I hope that we don't find out the wrong way, or in a way that will cost us much more, how dangerous this southern border is and how vulnerable it is. We know that we have pockets of terrorists. The fact that he found himself in Minnesota, there's obviously pockets in Michigan. There are places where they find themselves. And again, the FBI has to do a much better job. Border control has to do a better job. And of course, the White House, first and foremost, has to do a better job at setting the tone, setting the pace as to where we stand on national security, our border, and migration.
There's been a lot of talk recently about the UN Relief and Works Agency, or UNRWA, after it was revealed that several members participated in the October 7th attacks in southern Israel, which left more than 1,200 civilians dead. Now, Lisa, not only did Canada give money to the this UN agency, but the Biden administration granted huge money as well. Officials say the U.S. was the single biggest donor, having given UNRWA more than $1 billion since 2021, funding which has now since been suspended.
Hal, this is a crazy story, because we knew for many, many years, this is not something new. Yes, of course, what's surfaced more recently is that they were actually involved in October 7th, which is mind-boggling to think that employees of the United Nations that received taxpayer money from Canada, from the United States, took or participated or knew about or looked the other way, whatever it is, with a terrorist attack of that caliber. It's mind-boggling. But we knew for many, many years what UNRWA was doing. At the very, very least, we knew that they were involved in brainwashing. We knew that they knew about weapons being hidden in schools. We knew that they were, they had those textbooks where they're indoctrinating children from a very young age. And there's no pressure by the Democrats in order to give that money, but there were no conditions. Donald Trump came in and said, I'm cutting UNRWA, I'm cutting aid to the Palestinians in this manner because I know it is going to bad places. I know that it is going to bad things. And when Biden came in the first month, he released or came back and said, I'm just reversing this policy, again, with no preconditions. There was no leverage that was used by the United States to say, here's the money, but we're going to require that you do X, Y, and Z. At the very least, don't involve yourselves in terrorism. I mean, mind-boggling. But, at least now we have many countries, including the United States, that have pulled out, that are not funding UNRWA. There's a lot of pressure by individuals like AOC, who has made it her life's mission now to demand that the Biden administration reinstate aid to UNRWA. I mean, think about that. Somebody who is a representative, a political representative in the United States, begging for the administration to give money to terrorists. I mean, we need to all be on the right side, regardless. I mean, I know that the Israel-Palestinian issue has become like a ping pong game. I know a lot of individuals who are, getting their information from TikTok or Instagram, find themselves supporting Hamas or thinking that terrorism is okay. We really need to go back to that center core of terrorism's not okay. Let's start with that and then move outward from, finding constructive ways for peace between the two sides. But I think obviously pulling funding from UNRWA is a very symbolic and obviously pragmatic move. And I hope that we can move from there to eradicate this disease. Really, it's horrific.
Speaking of a nasty disease, Lisa, Philippine troops killed 9 suspected Muslim terrorists in the volatile South region, including 2 key suspects in a bomb attack that left 4 Christian worshippers dead.
Yeah, so this is something that we have worked on for a very long time at the Foreign Desk, that war on Christians in the Middle East and around the world, I should say. This trickles because obviously these terrorists find themselves everywhere. We just had another bombing in Turkey as well, and they have just fixation towards rooting out this Judeo-Christian influence wherever they find it. So these extremists exist in the Philippines, they exist all around the world, and of course fixated on churches, fixated on those who worship Christianity. And again, you know, it's like, how will we ever eradicate this? How will we ever get rid of this disease when it is being promoted on these social media platforms, when we find them on the streets of New York or LA or Toronto actually praising Hamas? I mean, I saw a scene out of a protest in Toronto where it wasn't just a pro-Palestinian protest, it was a pro-Hamas protest, and you see the cops bringing them hot coffee, and you wonder, I mean, how did this happen where these young police officers, and I guarantee it's not out of this radicalism, but it's just misinformation. And for some reason, the jihadists have won that narrative war, that propaganda war, and they control the media in terms of that messaging. So, you know, I think we have to bring these stories back into the forefront. I thank you for talking about it, but this war on Christianity, we saw a war on Christmas. We did a segment on that here at the Foreign Desk as well. This fixation throughout the world to cancel Christmas, to cancel God, to cancel the Judeo-Christian God, that is, and this radicalism to take its place.
Wow. She's the host of the Foreign Desk and our foreign affairs expert, Lisa Daftari. Thanks so much for joining us today from Los Angeles.
My pleasure.